Greetings War Thunderers, this is Longshot with you again with my first video in what I plan to be a series of guides for aircraft realistic battles. This video is intended to help people who've played arcade for a while, who already know their way around War Thunder and have a pretty good grasp on the basics of energy fighting. If you feel your knowledge or skills are a bit lacking in those areas, my suggestion would be to look at my beginner's guide videos, a link to which is displayed on the screen if you have annotations enabled, and to spend a bit of time mastering energy fighting tactics in arcade. And speaking of arcade, it's a mode I've played for a long time, and which I still play and get a lot of enjoyment out of. I'm not making this video to try and persuade people to try RB, rather I wanted to create a resource to help arcade players who'd like to give RB a fair crack and want to hit the ground running, being competitive from the outset rather than embarrassing themselves. So in this first video, I'm going to look at how to become accustomed to realistic flight models, and then how to aim and fire efficiently without the aid of arcade's lead indicator. Before I get started though, here's the War Thunder launcher. Down in the bottom right corner is a Works in Progress checkbox. For realistic battles I highly recommend using it, as the Work in Progress mouse aim is a lot smoother in RB. The old mouse aim notorious for the way it overcompensates with the tail controls, making planes wobble about and lose energy. Okay, so to start with, I've chosen an early monoplane fighter, the F2A1, with a battle rating in RB of 1.3. I do think it's a good idea to start with Tier 1, no matter your experience in arcade. The maps will be smaller, and as it's only Tier 1, you're less likely to meet up with highly skilled and experienced RB veterans who will wipe the floor with you before you've had a chance to learn anything. Biplanes are a lot of fun in RB, but they're also a dead end, as nothing you learn in them will carry over to monoplanes. So unless you plan to specialise in biplanes, I'd start with a plane like this one. Alternatives in other nations include any of the Italian monoplanes, the Ki-27 and A5M4, the I-16s and Lags, and for Britain the Spitfire Mark 1A. Now of course you could at this point just choose a plane, fire up a realistic battle and muddle through to the best of your ability and see what happens. But I believe it's a good idea to test fly a plane and get a good feel for its capabilities before flying it in battle. It's helpful to do so in arcade, even more so in RB, especially when you're just starting out. Okay, so before you fire up the test flight, make sure you've got realistic battle selected. I'm only saying this because I wasted time myself flying around wondering why the flight model was so similar to arcades. Okay, so we're in the test flight. The first thing to do is take off. In the F2A1, that's easy, just fire up the engine and the plane does the rest, just like arcade. But it's not always that straightforward in RB. If you apply max throttle with some planes, they'll turn violently to the side and crash due to propeller torque. So you'll need to get used to increasing power gently and being prepared to correct the plane's heading as it accelerates, only applying 100% throttle when it's moving at a decent speed. Another thing to note is the change in WEP. It doesn't cycle on or off as it does in arcade, instead it's constant. Neither does it provide anything like the same degree of boost. Use it for too long though, and you'll overheat your engine, which can kill it if you push it too far. If you've watched any of my arcade videos, you'll know that I like to test the handling characteristics of a plane in test flight before taking it to battle, and I'm going to do the same here, starting with the roll rate. Now, it rolls a fair bit slower than it does in arcade, plus it's rolling a little faster to the left than to the right, which again is the effect of propeller torque. Next I'm going to look at how well it turns using elevators, firstly without using flaps. I've turned on the smoke so I can see the size of the turning circle, which is fairly small, and it almost catches the end of the smoke trail, indicating that it's also turned very quickly. As I continue the turn, the speed drops and its turning speed slows. I can no longer even see the end of the smoke trail. So without combat flaps you'll get one good turn out of the elevators, but that's all. So let's try the turn with combat flaps extended and see what difference it makes. Same small turning circle, again almost reaches the smoke trail. But this time, as I continue the turn, it keeps within sight of the smoke, showing that its turn rate is now faster at low speed than it was with raised flaps. So if you need to turn the plane no more than 360 degrees, you don't need flaps, but if you're getting involved in an extended dogfight, then flaps are essential in this plane. Next, let's look at the rudder. In arcade it's evenly balanced with the elevator, the two of them able to propel the plane up into a climbing spiral manoeuvre, but it's just not capable of doing that in realistic. The best it can manage is a strange wing over Immelmann type thing. The rudder also wants to stall the wing and roll the plane upside down far more than it does in arcade, and it's hard to counteract that with the ailerons in this mode. Unlike in arcade where you can and should make heavy use of the rudder, in RB on this plane you have to go easy and use it only when needed with short taps. Next I'm seeing how well the plane can loop. From a starting indicative airspeed of 300 km an hour, it drops down almost to 140 at the top of the loop, but then it's over and into the dive. For obvious reasons, I wouldn't recommend trying to loop at speeds much slower than 300 km an hour. The plane's also good at snap rolling in RB, useful for avoiding head-ons. Now a key difference between arcade and realistic is if you go too fast in realistic, you'll lose things off your plane, and the definition of too fast varies from one plane to the next. So let's see the speed at which the F2A1 loses its combat flaps. So far, so good. A warning pops up at 500 km an hour, then at 550 I lose a flap. Now, if you think you don't plan on doing any close quarters dogfighting in the plane, you might think it doesn't matter if you lose the flaps. But you'll think differently when you're trying to nurse a damaged plane back to the runway, but you don't have the flaps to help you slow the plane and keep it flying at that low speed in order to land safely. So what else can break at high speed? Well, the wings, of course. And on some planes they can also snap off with high G-forces. Let's see if I can break the wings off this Buffalo. I'm passing 600, 650, past 700, and the speed indicator is still white, and I'm out of altitude. I'll hit the up elevator key, and you can see the elevator compressibility is a thing in realistic, unlike arcade. The plane pulled 10 Gs as it struggled to pull up, but its wings are still attached. And that's why the F2A1's a good starting plane for an arcade player. It's far more forgiving than many other planes in realistic. Okay, so let's move on to a mission editor battle, which you'll access using the test flight as so. Make sure it's set to realistic battles, free flight, with unlimited fuel and ammo. What I'm going to demonstrate here is how to easily practice shooting at live targets using the plane's realistic flight model and without the aid of the arcade lead indicator, which isn't available in RB. As you can see, I'm being followed by 3 planes. Those are my AI wingmen. Their aim is to stay in formation behind me wherever I fly. I can't outrun them as they have boosted engines, but I can easily outfly them, and that's important because I'm going to shoot them down. First I'm climbing to gain enough height to manoeuvre, and then I'll gain a bit of speed in a shallow dive before looping the plane. Remember from the test flight that it's a good looper, but AI pilots don't know how to loop, so it's a very easy way to gain separation from them. Okay, here we go. They're all flying off and starting a gentle horizontal turn, so I'm immediately in a position to choose a target and try to acquire a gun solution. And you might be asking, what's the point of shooting down drones that aren't even fighting back? Well, for someone new from arcade, it's not as easy as it looks. Here I'm firing like a typical arcade pilot with a long burst. Most, if not all, of my bullets went wide, and all I've done is waste ammunition. And you really don't want to waste ammo in realistic. It's a precious resource that you need to use carefully and precisely, else you'll find yourself making unnecessary trips back to the airfield to reload. The key is getting in closer before you shoot, and firing in short ranging bursts to get your guns on target. I've shot down one of the drones and he immediately respawns in a fresh plane, which means I can keep on doing this for as long as I like. Anyway, the choice of ammo is also important. You may be used to stealth in arcade, but I don't recommend it to start with in realistic, not until you've developed a high degree of accuracy with your shooting. Choose something like tracer, something with tracer so you can see where your shots are going. And to start with at least, forget about trying to engage at long arcade ranges like 800 meters or more. Those types of gunnery habits are not viable in realistic, except in head-ons. And in advising you to practice trigger discipline and get in close, I'm only repeating the words of historical ace pilots, who obviously knew what they were talking about. Apart from practicing your gunnery skills, shooting down drones like this is a really good way to get to grips with how your plane handles in a combat setting. It's one thing to put it through its paces in a test flight, quite another to actually try to line up the crosshairs on a moving target. So this exercise is teaching you how to aim and making you comfortable with the plane. For me, I look at it as, well, if I can't easily shoot down multiple drones with minimal effort and wasted ammo, then I'm probably not ready to face planes piloted by humans. Just trying a head-on pass here, but my aim still needs work. Pulling an Immelman at a much lower speed than I recommended earlier just to see what happens, and it makes it just. Better do this kind of thing in this environment than in a real battle where it might get you shot down. This gives me a chance to see how it handles at low speed as I try and line up a target. Firstly, they're crossing in front before I can draw a lead on them, so I'm going to pull up to avoid overshooting. Note I have combat flaps extended, maximising my manoeuvrability. The target's scissored back the other way, so I need to roll, which does take a while. There's possibly a deflection shot there, but it's a difficult one, so I'm holding fire. And then I have him at close range, nicely lined up, with a very short burst. If you make mistakes like I do here, trying for a head-on and crashing the plane, don't worry. You can spawn in again as many times as you want. One last example is I'm going to try something different and actually get an energy advantage over a drone instead of simply turn fighting them. And to do that I'm starting off with a dive, after which I'm going to Immelman, which should put me above at least one drone who will have followed me down. I want to set up a situation that's more representative of how you actually want to fly an energy fighter like the Buffalo in realistic battles. One where you have an altitude advantage over a turning opponent and can exploit that advantage to force a kill. Okay, pulling up into a second Immelman. Nice to know it can do 2 of those in a row coming out of a high-speed dive. And I have a drone on my left in a slow turn. Obviously low on speed. He's diving as he turns. I take a couple of ranging pot shots at him. Doesn't line up easily, so I pull up again into a high yo-yo. I'm going to focus on that plane and ignore the others. I tried to roll as I pulled up, but I haven't got used to the slow roll speed on the Buffalo yet. I ended up looping the plane instead. Possible deflection shot here. I don't have enough lead. My bullets fall short, so again it's up into a high yo-yo. Again that slow roll speed, which gives me more separation from the target than I'd like. I need to work on my technique with this some more. Okay, he's turned back the other way. I can approach again for another attempted deflection shot. A couple of sparks, but that's all. Again I lift up to avoid overshooting. So I'm just following this pattern of climbing to keep out of his guns, pretending he's a real opponent of course, and then using that altitude to gain speed for the next attacking pass. A couple of flashes and a brief burst there. I'm trying to be disciplined, shooting only at close range when I feel there's a high chance of actually hitting the target. No spraying and praying. All the while he's dropping lower. His constant turning is losing him speed as well. Turning does lose you altitude in realistic. And that was a much better high yo-yo. I'm getting better at it. I didn't turn into the loop that time and I maintained closer contact with the target. Perhaps a bit too close. But this is all excellent practice. I'm getting a good feel for the plane now. I'm learning how to fly it in a real battle situation where dogfights of this type are quite common. What's also common is the amount of time it's taking me to shoot down this plane. It's not always easy to drop a plane in a single pass in RB, especially with the relatively weak guns on Tier 1 planes, making it all the more important to know how to get an energy advantage like this and patiently exploit it over and over until you finally succeed, giving the other guy no chance to escape. And with this final pass I'll actually manage to rip off a wing. So there's 2 very valuable ways to prepare for realistic battles. Test flight to measure what your plane's capable of and the speeds at which it loses wings and flaps, and free flight against AI drones to practice your dogfight maneuvering and gunnery in a non-threatening environment. If you don't feel ready for battle just yet, you can always kick it up another notch, choosing the mission editor and selecting head-to-head against a bunch of hostile opponents that will actually shoot back at you, although they're still dumb AI pilots, of course. I don't suggest taking the F2A against J2M4s though. Perhaps start with more typical planes such as A5 M4s or KO-27s. So I hope this has provided you with a starting point for preparing to tackle RB. Any decent arcade pilot who knows a bit about energy fighting will, after practicing as I've done in this video, be well prepared to try a live Tier 1 battle and will most likely come out of it with several kills and hopefully bring their plane back alive at the end. In the next video I'll show footage from a typical Tier 1 battle and talk you through the differences from arcade in terms of the gameplay and objectives. Until then, good hunting, and I'll see you in the skies.